people believed they hardly collaborated for years. However, Lou Ferrigno just came clean. Off camera, Bixby spent hours instructing him how to move, act, and feel. He shielded Lou's green cosmetics from his hearing aids. He even assisted him during 12-hour shifts, which caused 1/3 of the team to become ill or quit. However, celebrity isn't the true story. It's about suffering, loss, and a connection that permanently altered both of their lives. When Bill Bixby was 13 years old in 1947, a whisper-worthy incident occurred inside San Francisco's Grace Cathedral. While wearing his robe, young Bill stealthily pulled out a slingshot and pointed it at the bishop during a choral service. He struck him. During the service, right there. This was no innocent mishap. There was a plot behind it. He was permanently barred from the choir. For his family, the meager choir stipend had meant the world. Jane, his mother, was employed at I. After years of financial hardship, top manager Magnan and Company was attempting to keep their family solvent. She was severely mortified by the controversy, which also damaged their already shaky reputation. However, the incident also revealed more about Bill. Authorities did not frighten him. When something didn't feel right, he would rather break the rules than keep quiet. He would live the rest of his life in that way. Bill was 18 years old in 1952 and was being drafted into the Korean War. He was aware of the dangers. In that conflict, more than 36,000 Americans had lost their lives. He made a quick move rather than waiting to be taken by the Army. He joined the Reserve Marine Corps. He was a member of VMA 141, a unit with a troubled past. Of its 41 officers, 18 had been killed at Guadalcanal during World War II. Bill's monthly salary as a private first class was a pittance. That wasn't as much as he could earn from any ordinary job. However, remaining in the United States allowed him to live and pursue his dreams. Bill stayed close to home while processing personnel files at Naval Air Station Oakland, while others his age were leaving to battle. His career and life might have been saved by that choice. His early years are the reason this was so important. During the Great Depression, Bill was growing up. Wilfred Bixby, too, his father, only made $18 to $22 a week as a store clerk. Today, that amounts to roughly $350 to $400. His mom works at I. Magnan's weekly salary was slightly higher, between $35 and $40. However, it was still insufficient. His father enlisted in the Navy and sailed to the South Pacific in 1942 when Bill was 8 years old. Jane was left to raise him by herself. They progressively downsized their residences. Bill frequently went hungry before bed. To survive, they had to rely on religious food programs. That's why being expelled hurt more than just his pride, and why the choir money was so important. Bill was just a few credits away from graduating from UC Berkeley in 1956. Despite being broke, he was resolute. For as little as $40 to $45 a week, he accepted a job at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. He earned an additional $15 to $20 a day working as a lifeguard at the hotel pool because that wasn't enough to support him. He stayed in a small room nearby and worked 12 to 14 hours a day. He took acting classes with any extra change and ate the leftover motel meals. However, the Roosevelt was not chosen at random. It was a wise choice. Stars like Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable were drawn to that pool. When some advertising executives in Detroit noticed him there one day, they offered him a modeling position that paid $200 per week, which was 3 times his earnings from the motel. Everything changed in that instant. He used his remaining $75 to purchase a bus ticket to Detroit in 1959. The boyfriend was a theater play in which he had been offered a part. He was only able to get $25 a week from the Detroit Civic Theater. He barely had any money left over for supper because his rent was $20. During the production, he lost 18 pounds and subsisted on bread and beans. But he gained something considerably more precious than cash from that role. He was spotted by talent scouts. They offered him $300 a week when he returned to Los Angeles. That $75 risk became a full-time career. He paid for studies at the Estelle Harmon School of Acting using the $200 he made from the Detroit concert. An agency discovered him there and signed him. 2 years later, he landed his first real TV position on Dobie Gillis's Many Loves. Then, in 1963, he introduced himself as Bill Bixby as he entered an interview. Jack Chertok, the producer, gave him a look and said, "No, you're not. You're Tim O'Hara." In doing so, he was able to secure the lead part on My Favorite Martian, which became one of the top 10 TV shows and ran until 1966. With a rating of 26.3, it came in at number 10 during the 1963-64 season, but the work was harsh. This show filmed 5 full days with up to 75 setups every day, whereas other shows filmed 3 or 4 days a week. After one episode concluded, they were given the screenplay for the following one without any rehearsal time. The production cost for each episode was about $57,000. Bill became recognized because of the job, but it also caused him anxiety. Would he ever be free of Tim O'Hara's image? He embarked on minor, often uncredited, film roles in order to make his debut. He co-starred with Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon as a tattooed sailor in Billy Wilder's Irma la Douce in 1963. Because of its premise, the film, which made $25.2 million, was prohibited on television for years. Despite playing a little part, he developed relationships with leading directors and gained knowledge of how large studio sets operated. He was cast opposite Elvis Presley as James J. Jameson III in the 1967 film Clambake. However, the set was in disarray. Elvis slipped in his bathroom, injured his head, and put on weight. The filming was postponed. Additionally, Elvis was unhappy, creating yet another ridiculous musical. His group started water fights, pie fights, and firecrackers every day. To keep the hysteria under control, MGM had to issue warnings. Bill, however, maintained his professionalism. Honored him, even using Softly As I Leave You, one of Bill's favorite spoken word songs, in his subsequent performances. Nevertheless, the film made it to the Santa Carta 15 at the box office. Bill performed with Elvis again in Speedway the following year, in 1968. He played a gambler named Kenny Don Ford, whose addiction almost ended his friend's racing career. With actual racers like Richard Petty and Cale Yarborough, it was the first major film on NASCAR. Elvis received $850,000 in addition to 50% of the earnings. Bill had a complicated, imperfect, and sensitive personality. It was among his best performances in early movies. Bill was sick of nearly playing the part at that point. He began directing in 1970 while Eddie's father was courting him. He played Tom Corbett, a widowed father raising his son Eddie, in the 1969-1972 season. Audiences were astounded by the emotional connection he had with young actor Brandon Cruz. The Karate Story, which debuted in January 1972, was one of the 8 episodes he directed overall. For that role, he was nominated for an Emmy in 1971. He was a meticulous, and active director. He pushed everyone to achieve his goals because he knew what they were. The majority of leading actors were not permitted to direct at the time, but Bill made it possible. He stunned audiences once more in 1976. In Rich Man, Poor Man, he portrayed Willie Abbott, a man molded by power and greed. Far from his loving fatherly persona, this was a sinister role. On average, 34.9 million people watched each episode of the miniseries. He was nominated for another Emmy for his performance. His portrayal of a morally flawed guy astounded many, but that's what made it so potent. When he starred in The Magician in 1973, it was one of his most unexpected roles. He portrayed a real magician who solved crimes, Anthony Blake. Every magic act he performed on film was authentic, which is what made it unique. No fake photography, no special effects. He received instruction in escape acts, mentalism, and sleight of hand from magician Mark Wilson. The 22-episode series taught viewers about magic done the hard way. He also continued to direct. He directed manic episodes such as A Ransom for Yesterday in 1975. This was broadcast on February 9. Today, it revolved on a $250,000 ransom that was worth $1.4 million. It was one of the most violent shows on television, with an average of 3.2 deaths per episode. Bill's guidance was more concerned with the emotional fallout than the violence. He proved he could tackle difficult crime stories and still make them feel relatable by handling a total of 4 episodes, including one titled Courage and Hardball. Bill Bixby made a daring demand when he entered CBS meetings in November 1977. He assured them that the Hulk series would not be a dumb children's program. It would be serious, true drama, he remarked. He didn't want cartoonish jokes or vibrant colors. He wished to convey suffering, isolation, and hardship. The producers initially didn't think he was real. They anticipated a Batman from the 1960s. However, everyone was taken aback when the pilot aired on November 4, 1977. Dark shadows and melancholy piano music gave the impression that it was a horror movie. Dr. David Banner was portrayed by Bixby as a man wallowing in his own remorse. CBS's highest-rated TV film of the year was that pilot. Bixby quickly demonstrated his argument. The entire series, which consisted of 80 episodes, began airing on March 10, 1978, and ended on May 12, 1982. The work behind the scenes was difficult. The Hulk's actor, Lou Ferrigno, had to spend 3 to 4 hours a day applying makeup. He sat for 20 hours straight on the pilot. He still had to perform in full costume for 12 to 14 hours after applying makeup. Even the paint was difficult for him to remove. 2 helpers would wash his back, and they had to erect a special shower in his trailer. They only worked 3 hard days in some weeks. At other occasions, they worked non-stop for 7 days. Skin issues resulted from his green makeup. His face was covered in equipment that felt like gelatin adhered to his flesh. The makeup crew underwent multiple changes. It wasn't simple. However, Bixby wasn't merely acting during all of this. He also began directing episodes. He directed the first, a 2-part tale that became one of the series' most potent pieces, in 1981. Something happened that year that would permanently alter Bixby. He and his 6-year-old son, Christopher, were on a ski vacation at Mammoth Lakes on March 4, 1981. Suddenly, the boy got a throat infection. Christopher waited in the hospital while the doctor worked to remove a splinter from another patient's finger. It was already too late when they attempted to place a breathing tube. Christopher died after going into cardiac arrest. Bixby later claimed that while the doctor was extracting a splinter from another doctor's finger, his son suffocated. He was devastated by that loss. He claimed that for 2 years, he was unable to think clearly due to his anger. Actress Brenda Benet, Christopher's mother, killed herself on April 7, 1982, a little more than a year later. She was just 36. She laid down in the bathroom, lighted candles, and used a .38 revolver to shoot herself. The previous year, Bixby and Benet had separated. Friends claimed that ever since their kid passed away, she had been drowning in sorrow. 2 weeks prior, she had also broken up with someone. It was excessive. Within 13 months, Bixby lost both his ex-wife and his child. He poured himself into his work in order to survive. He began directing Mr. Merlin episodes in late 1981. The Cloning of the Green, one of the first episodes, aired on October 14, 1981. Despite his suffering, Bixby directed many of the show's 22 episodes, which concluded in March 1982. Despite his obvious pain, he remained kind and friendly, according to others on site. His survival strategy became directing. Years before, when he was working on The Courtship of Eddie's Father, 1969 to 1972, the craving for family and connection had begun. Brandon Cruz, the youngster who played Eddie, didn't have a stable upbringing. He was taken under Bixby's wing. They bonded deeply off-screen. Bixby referred to Cruz as his biological family. "I didn't know I had that part of me until after the show," he once remarked. Brandon was responsible for that. Bixby became even more dependent on Cruz after the death of his son in 1981. In remembrance of their enduring relationship, Cruz named his own child after Bixby years later. Bixby forged yet another unexpected relationship on The Incredible Hulk. Lou Ferrigno. Ferrigno, the youngest Mr. Peace or Universe champion in history, joined at the age of just 21. However, he lacked acting experience. He was patiently educated by Bixby. Bixby would subtly demonstrate to Ferrigno how to convey emotion throughout lengthy night shots. Ferrigno eventually started referring to Bixby as a father figure. Ferrigno claimed that his favorite episodes were those that Bixby directed, even after several decades had passed. Ferrigno's growth as an actor was aided by that friendship. Bixby made a comeback as David Banner in the 1988 television film The Incredible Hulk Returns. It wasn't on CBS this time. NBC carried it. Additionally, it debuted Marvel's Thor. Bixby came up with the idea. His goal was to link the Hulk to a larger cosmos. However, the network preferred less drama and more action. Bixby resisted. He ensured that the film's melancholic piano tunes and somber tone persisted. To become the Hulk again, Ferrigno had to put in a lot of training and gain 45 pounds in 3 months. On May 22, 1988, the film was released. It remained faithful to Bixby's vision while laying the groundwork for upcoming Hulk projects. His directing abilities were so good that in 1977, he received a nomination for a Directors Guild of America award for an episode of Rich Man, Poor Man, Book 2. The fact that the original author hadn't even published a second book yet made it startling. Bixby had to learn it on the fly. Among the episodes, Chapter 3 was particularly noteworthy and influenced the direction of miniseries television. His projects weren't all successful. He oversaw the pilot for Walter, the third MASH spin-off, in 1984. The only time it was broadcast was on July 17, 1984. Additionally, the Democratic National Convention delayed it, thus it never broadcast on the West Coast. The narrative was excessively gloomy. Radar O'Reilly became a suicidal police officer after losing his farm and getting divorced while on honeymoon. It was deemed unwatchable by critics. One even stated that they would prefer to see the speech given by Walter Mondale. In the same year, Bixby also contributed to the Dreams television series. It was innovative for its time. It made advantage of music video styles and stereo sound. Jamie Gertz and John Stamos played the lead roles. Kiss Me Red, the pilot, and Suspicions, an unaired episode, were both directed by Bixby. Only from October 3 to October 31, 1984, did the show run. Although there were only 5 episodes, Heart's Song alone from the series became popular in 1987. The soundtrack endured despite the show's demise. Bixby directed 8 episodes of the comedy Sledgehammer between 1987 and 1988. It was a parody of Dirty Harry, complete with ridiculous jokes and excessive violence. In one episode, Bixby even made a brief appearance as a prisoner shouting, I'm free," as the incorrect door opened. It demonstrated Bixby's range and was odd and humorous. Bixby remarried in December 1990, this time to Laura Michaels. Although it didn't last, it felt like a new beginning. He was given a prostate cancer diagnosis in 1991. She left him after a few months into their marriage. In June 1992, their divorce was finalized. The cruelest aspect was that, now that he had finally opened up, he was dealing with cancer by himself. According to friends, he was at his lowest. No marriage, no family, and disease that is consuming his bones. Bill Bixby was diagnosed with prostate cancer in April 1991. Anyone could be stopped in their tracks by such news. Not him, though. His pace remained constant. He continued to show up for work, directing episodes of NBC's popular program Blossom. By 1992, he continued to walk onto the scene despite his excruciating pain and the fact that the disease had spread to his liver, bladder, and bones. He directed an episode titled Getting Lucky on November 20, 1992. He checked into UCLA Medical Center the very next day for an experimental suramine treatment. He was attempting to control discomfort that would not go away by taking tablets and intravenous medications 5 or 6 times a day. However, he never allowed the staff or actors to witness him grumbling. Not only was he working while dying, but he still cared about getting every shot correct, which is why they were astonished. The Death of the Incredible Hulk was a television film that NBC had shown 2 years prior, in February 1990. In addition to directing the whole movie, Bixby played Dr. David Banner one final time. In the narrative, Banner pretended to be David Bellamy, a mentally handicapped janitor, while hiding out in Portland. Banner ultimately perished in a plane crash while he was searching for a solution. It seemed too near, too genuine. Backstage, they had already drafted a scenario for the retaliation of the Incredible Hulk, a follow-up in which Banner would resurrect, but this time with the body of the Hulk and Banner's intellect. They were never able to arrive. Everything came to an end when Bixby's cancer reached its fatal stage. Bixby portrayed a murder suspect in the January 1992 episode of Diagnosis of Murder on CBS. After more than 3 decades of acting, it was his last movie part. Even though he was undergoing severe chemotherapy at the time, he managed to give one of his most impactful performances. Vancouver, where he had shot his previous Hulk feature, served as the location for this one. He was still so sharp that no one could believe it. Marriott hardly appeared in the film as well. They had previously collaborated. Everyone there was profoundly affected by seeing Bixby endure it all. Bill Bixby passed away at the age of 59 in his Century City residence on November 21, 1993. His body had been torn apart by cancer for 3 years. Even nevertheless, medical professionals reported that he lived for over 2 years longer than they had anticipated. More than a life was lost when he passed away. Fans had hoped for a Hulk sequel, but it was never made. The Revenge of the Incredible Hulk script was previously written in July 1990. But there was no flag without Bixby. Hundreds of people from the industry attended his funeral. He was more than just an actor in their eyes. They recall a man who always showed up, remained generous, and gave his all each and every day. Bixby never stopped helping people, even when he was in suffering. He gave one-on-one mentoring to crew members and young actors. People claimed that before offering counsel, he slithered into your head to comprehend your issues. And he continued to smile while taking numerous painkillers and enduring ongoing treatments. Brandon Cruz, his co-star during Eddie's father's courting, claimed that Bixby never belittled anyone. Even when he was dying, he treated everyone equally. Bixby had also endured hardships from which most people would never fully recover years before. Christopher, his 6-year-old son, passed away unexpectedly while on a ski vacation in 1981. Brenda Bennett, his ex-wife, killed herself the next year. Bixby never stopped working, but she was unable to cope with the loss of their son. His getaway was his job. According to his co-workers, he didn't simply keep going. Despite all that agony, he continued to uplift people. He had even been put to the test beyond what most actors would agree upon during the filming of The Incredible Hulk. He had to take out his painful, hard contact lenses every 15 minutes for 2 hours of makeup just for the transformation scenes. Every day, Ferrigno, who portrayed the Hulk, spent 3 to 4 hours applying green makeup. Ferrigno spent 20 hours straight doing makeup in the 1977 pilot. The green paint rubbed off on everything, ruining the outfits of the children on stage. However, Bixby never became angry. No matter how difficult the days were, he kept everyone on track. They even had a 4 a.m. Lou Ferrigno's breakfast was stolen by a rogue coyote on the day of filming. He was sitting outside his trailer with a huge omelet made with 12 eggs. And the coyote grabbed it in the middle of that icy early morning shot. Bixby remained calm. He changed the timetable, joked about it, and continued. It was incorporated into the folklore. The Hulk's anger can be explained by not eating breakfast. The majority of people are unaware that Ferrigno was directly trained by Bixby. It was Ferrigno's first time acting. It was made even more difficult by the fact that he was hard of hearing. Bixby spent hours off camera to help him with placement, language, and even using movement to convey emotions. Bixby made sure makeup workers never brought green paint close to Ferrigno's ears, who wore hearing aids. Ferrigno compared Bixby to a father figure. He even studied acting by watching Bixby's previous performances. Cary Grant once visited the set specifically to meet the Hulk. Bixby ensured Ferrigno's picture was taken. He was constantly encouraging others and ensuring that everyone had what they required. However, the Incredible Hulk's filming schedule was a nightmare. They lacked a soundstage of their own. They were always changing places. A third of the crew had left or become ill by the fourth season. Days were 12 to 14 hours long. Ferrigno occasionally worked till 2 in the morning. However, Bixby never skipped a day, fell, or broke. He was still in control even though he was leading Blossom only 5 days prior to his passing. Ferrigno and Bixby didn't spend much time together on screens, but they had a genuine bond. Before the transition sequences, Bixby would mimic Banner's feelings so Ferrigno could express them verbally. He was performing himself and coaching him at the same time. That's why the Incredible Hulk's death was so poignant. The grief was palpable, not only from Banner but also from Bixby. NBC made more plans after realizing how wonderfully that film performed. Banner would have come back to life with the following one, but cancer put an end to it all. 6 days before his death, Bixby helmed his last Blossom episode. Ferrigno claims that Bixby taught him valuable lessons about life, work, dignity, and popularity in addition to performing. Additionally, the planned Hulk comeback vanished along with Bixby. It didn't feel right without him.